The morning sun of Kolos Prime cast long shadows across the Zentari Military Academy. 4 alien cadets walked through the crystal corridors toward their final assignment meeting. Their footsteps echoed differently on the smooth floor. Vexa High's 4 arms swung naturally as he moved, his crystal skin catching the light. Behind him, Kretok slithered forward, his green scales shifting colors with each emotion. Humdar's heavy steps shook the ground slightly, his gray fur neat and clean from morning grooming. Zilara floated just above the floor, her moth wings, creating tiny breezes as delicate light patterns danced across her pale skin. The academy had been their home for 3 years now. Students from 12 different worlds learned together here. They studied war, but war as the Coalition understood it. Clean war, honorable war, war with rules that everyone followed, war that ended quickly with minimal death. This was how civilized beings fought when they had no choice but to fight. Vexai had always been the best student in strategic studies. His crystal brain could process multiple battle scenarios at once. He could see patterns that others missed. His professors said he would make an excellent commander someday. Today felt like any other assignment day, though this was their final project before graduation. Kretok worried about everything. His scales turned yellow when he was nervous, which happened often. But he was brilliant at understanding how different species thought. The Slaxi could sense emotions through heat patterns, which made him good at predicting enemy behavior. He just wished he could stop being afraid of his own shadow. Humdar was the strongest cadet in their class. His people, the Orsoni, were known throughout the galaxy for their physical power. He could lift objects that took 3 other beings to move, but he was gentle by nature. Violence bothered him unless it was absolutely necessary. He preferred to solve problems by talking rather than fighting. Zilara was the most peaceful of them all. Her species had never fought a war in their recorded history. The Villani believed all life was sacred. They had joined the Coalition as healers and teachers, not warriors. She was only studying military strategy to help prevent wars from starting in the first place. They entered the briefing room where Commander Nolthek waited for them. The old Zentari had fought in the last great war 40 years ago. His crystal skin was darker than most, marked with the scars that came from real combat. He had seen things that the younger generation could barely imagine. But even his experiences were within the bounds of civilized warfare. "Sit down, all of you," Commander Nolthek said. His voice carried the authority of someone who had led troops into battle. "Today, you receive your final assignment. This project will determine if you graduate and receive your commissions as Coalition officers." The 4 cadets took their seats around the circular table. Each chair was designed for their specific species. Vexa High sat upright, his 4 hands folded neatly. Kretok coiled his long body in the heated chair made for his kind. Humdar squeezed into the reinforced seat built to hold his weight. Zilara perched on the floating cushion that let her wings spread comfortably. "5 years ago, we made contact with a new species," the commander continued. "They call themselves humans. Their planet is called Earth. They have been granted membership in the Coalition, but many questions remain about them." Vexahai nodded. He had heard about the humans. They seemed aggressive during first contact. Some diplomats worried about their nature, but surely they could not be too different from other Coalition species. "Your assignment is to study human military history and tactics. You will review archived footage of their conflicts. Then you will present your analysis to the senior staff. You must recommend how to best integrate human forces into Coalition military operations." Kretok's scales shifted to a lighter green. This sounded like a straightforward research project. He was good at research. All of them were. "The humans have provided us with extensive records of their military conflicts," Commander Nolthek went on. "Everything from their ancient battles to their most recent wars. You will have access to actual battlefield footage, tactical analyses, and strategic planning documents." Humdar raised his massive hand. "Commander, How different can they be from us? All coalition species follow similar patterns of warfare. The commander paused for a moment. Something flickered across his dark crystal features. That is what you will determine. I will say this. Humans are unlike any species we have encountered before. Keep an open mind. Zil-Ara's light patterns pulsed with curiosity. Are they more advanced than us? Do they have better weapons? Some of their technology is behind ours. Some is ahead. What makes them different is not their tools. It is how they think about conflict itself. Commander Nolthek stood up. You have been assigned the advanced viewing chamber. All the human records are already loaded into the system. Begin with their earliest conflicts and work forward chronologically. The four cadets left the briefing room together. They walked toward the viewing chamber with confidence. After 3 years of studying warfare from dozens of species, they felt ready for anything. How complicated could one more species be? The viewing chamber was the most advanced facility in the academy. It could project 3-dimensional recordings. That made viewers feel like they were actually present at historical events. The room adjusted lighting, temperature, and even smells to match recorded conditions. Students could experience battles as if they were really there. Vex-High activated the system with his security code. The walls disappeared, replaced by a simple menu of human conflicts. The list was longer than expected. Much longer. These humans seemed to fight quite often. Let us start with something basic, Vex-High suggested. This one is labeled World War II. It appears to be a large-scale conflict from their recent history. Kreetok slithered closer to the control panel. The file size is enormous. How long did this war last? 6 years, Zil-Ara read from the summary data. Her light patterns showed surprise. That seems excessive. Most coalition conflicts end in weeks or months. Perhaps they were inefficient at warfare, Humdar suggested. Some younger species take time to learn proper tactics. They selected a battle from the middle of the conflict, something called Stalingrad. The room transformed around them. Suddenly they stood in a ruined city covered in snow. Buildings were reduced to broken shells. The smell of smoke and worse things filled their nostrils. This looks terrible, Zil-Ara whispered. Her species had never seen such destruction. Then the footage began to play. Human soldiers moved through the ruined streets. They carried primitive weapons by coalition standards. Their equipment looked heavy and crude. But something was wrong with the scene. It took Vex-High a moment to realize what bothered him. The humans were not retreating. Despite the horrific conditions, despite being outnumbered, despite the obvious danger, they kept fighting. Street by street, building by building, room by room. Kreetok's scales began to shift color as he watched. A human soldier named Jake. Morrison crawled through rubble with a wounded leg. Instead of seeking medical help, he found a position where he could keep shooting at the enemy. A female soldier called Lisa Campbell pulled her injured teammate to safety while bullets flew around them. This makes no sense, Humdar muttered. They should withdraw and regroup. Any rational species would retreat under these conditions, but the humans did not retreat. They fought for every meter of ground. They fought when they were hurt. They fought when they were hungry. They fought when any sane being would have given up. The four cadets watched in growing disbelief as the battle footage continued. They had studied wars from many species, but nothing had prepared them for this. These humans seemed to ignore pain, fear, and logic itself. When the recording finally ended, they sat in stunned silence. None of them spoke for several minutes. Perhaps this was unusual, Vex-High finally said. Maybe we should look at other examples. But deep down, he was beginning to suspect that what they had just seen was not unusual for humans at all. And that thought terrified him more than he wanted to admit. The human ship looked small next to the massive council station. Other species arrived in huge fleets with hundreds of support vessels, medical ships, and backup teams. The humans came in a single exploration ship that looked like it had seen better days. Scratches covered its hull, and one of the antenna arrays was held together with what appeared to be metal tape. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching Nexus Prime grow larger through the window. The former Marine was tall and lean, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He had spent 5 years exploring the outer rim of the galaxy, making first contact with dozens of alien species. But this was different. This was humanity's chance to join something bigger. Pretty impressive, said Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, joining him at the window. The xenobiologist was already excited about meeting new alien species. She had filled 3 notebooks just from the preliminary scans of the station. Look at those docking bays. They must have facilities for hundreds of different atmospheric requirements. Commander Ryan Kelly walked up behind them, moving with the quiet confidence of a former Navy SEAL. Defensive capabilities look solid, too. Those aren't just sensor arrays on the outer ring. Somebody designed this place to handle trouble. Always. Thinking like a soldier, laughed Dr. Amanda Carter as she joined the group. The psychologist had been studying the cultural briefings on council species for weeks. This is supposed to be a diplomatic mission, Ryan. Everything's a tactical situation until proven otherwise, Kelly replied with a grin. But I'll try to be diplomatic about it. Engineer Tony Russo looked up from his tablet where he had been reviewing the technical specifications of the station. Did you guys see the power requirements for this place? They're running fusion reactors the size of city blocks. And look at this artificial gravity system. I've never seen anything like it. Morrison smiled as he listened to his team. He had chosen each of them carefully, not just for their skills, but for how they worked together. They had been through dangerous situations before, from hostile alien encounters to equipment failures in deep space, but they always faced challenges with the same attitude, curiosity, humor, and absolute confidence in each other. Attention. Human vessel, came a voice over the communication system. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with grinding stone. This is Nexus Prime Traffic Control. You are cleared for Docking Bay 77 Alpha. Please follow the guidance beacons. Roger that, Control, Morrison replied. Human ship New Horizons following guidance beacons to 77 Alpha. The docking process took an hour. The station's systems had to adjust to accommodate human atmospheric requirements, and the docking bay had to be configured for their ship's unique design. During the wait, the team watched other species through the windows. They saw beings made of living, crystal directing floating platforms loaded with supplies. Gaseous creatures that glowed like small suns drifted through the corridors in transparent tubes. 6-legged spider-like beings scurried across walls and ceilings with perfect ease. This is going to be fun, Rodriguez said, already taking notes, on the different biological adaptations she was observing. When they finally docked, the team gathered their equipment and prepared to disembark. Unlike other candidate species who brought extensive protective gear and survival equipment, the humans carried simple backpacks and basic supplies. Morrison had insisted on keeping things light. If we can't handle the test with what we normally carry, he had said, then we probably don't deserve to pass. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and they stepped into the docking bay. The gravity felt comfortable, and the air smelled clean with a slight metallic tang. Waiting for them was their first official council representative. Ambassador Thys Vell was impressive even by alien standards. She stood 8 feet tall on 6 jointed legs, with a body that looked like a cross between a spider and a praying mantis. Her compound eyes reflected the station's lights like faceted jewels, and when she moved, it was with the fluid grace of a natural predator. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," she said, her voice coming from a translator device attached to her chest. I'm Observer Thys Vell. I will be overseeing your crucible test." "Pleasure to meet you," Morrison said, extending his hand in the human greeting. After a moment's hesitation, Thys Vell reached out with one of her front appendages and gently touched his hand. You are smaller than our scans indicated, she observed, and you carry very little equipment. We travel light, Kelly said with a shrug. Easier to move fast when you're not weighed down with gear. Theisvel's compound eyes focused on him with what might have been confusion. Move fast? The test is not about speed. It is about survival. Same thing, really, Rodriguez chimed in. The faster you adapt to new situations, the better your chances of surviving them. The observer led them through the station corridors, pointing out various facilities and explaining the layout. The team was fascinated by everything they saw. Russo kept asking technical questions about the station's systems. Carter observed the interactions between different species with professional interest. Rodriguez practically bounced with excitement every time they passed a new type of alien. You seem remarkably relaxed for beings about to face the crucible, Theisvel commented as they walked. Should we be nervous? Morrison asked. I mean, it's just a test, right? Theisvel stopped walking and turned to face him fully. All 6 of her eyes focused on the human captain. Captain Morrison. In the past millennium, 824 species have failed this test. Many suffered casualties. Some lost. Their entire delegation. The environmental challenges alone have killed thousands of beings. But 23 species passed, Morrison pointed out. So it's possible. Barely, Theisvel said. My own people, the Arachnan, lost 40% of our test subjects. The mighty Korthak Empire nearly failed completely. The challenges you will face are designed to push you beyond your limits. The humans exchanged glances, and then Kelly started laughing. Lady, with all due respect, we're from a planet where the weather tries to kill us on a regular basis. Our idea of a relaxing vacation involves climbing mountains that can crush you or swimming in oceans full of things with more teeth than a hardware store. Plus, added Carter, we've seen Jake here fix a life support system during a meteor shower, while the ship was being attacked by space pirates. If that didn't break us, I think we can handle your test. Theisvel's confusion was evident even through her alien features. She had overseen hundreds of these briefings, and no species had ever reacted this way. Most spent weeks preparing, brought massive support teams, and approached the test with the gravity it deserved. They reached the briefing room, where holographic displays showed the 3 phases of the test. The environmental challenges looked like a catalog of the most hostile conditions in the known galaxy. Extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, predatory creatures, and natural disasters that could level cities. Phase 1, Theisvel explained, tests your ability to survive in hostile environments without compromising the ecosystem or other life forms. Looks like camping in Alaska, Russo observed, studying the display. Except with more interesting wildlife. The second phase showed resource scarcity scenarios, failing life support systems, limited food and water, equipment breakdowns, and the pressure of making life or death decisions with incomplete information. Phase 2 tests resource management and decision-making under extreme stress. Theisvel continued. Standard emergency protocols, Carter nodded. We've done similar exercises during our deep space missions. The third phase was the most complex. Multiple simultaneous crises, competing priorities, and the need to coordinate with other species while everything fell apart around them. Phase 3 tests leadership and cooperation during catastrophic system failures, Theisvel concluded. Morrison studied the displays for a moment, then turned to his team. Thoughts? Looks comprehensive, Rodriguez said. Good variety of challenges. Should be an interesting learning experience. The cooperation element will be fun, Carter added. I've always wanted to work with alien psychology under pressure. Equipment. Failure scenarios look pretty standard, Russo said, though I'd like to see their technical specifications. Might learn some new repair techniques. Timeline seems reasonable, Kelly concluded. Plenty of time to adapt to each phase. Theisvel stared at them in silence for a long moment. Every other species treated these briefings with solemn reverence, asking detailed questions about survival. Strategies and backup protocols. The humans were discussing the test like it was an interesting training exercise. "Do you have any questions about the test procedures?" she finally asked. "Just one," Morrison said with a smile. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow," Tesvel replied. "You have tonight to prepare. Most species use this time for meditation, equipment checks, and final strategy sessions." "Great," said Rodriguez. "That gives me time to read up on the local ecosystems we'll be encountering, and I can review the technical specs on their simulation systems," Russo added. "I want to observe the social dynamics in the station common areas," Carter said. "Research for the cooperation phase. I'll do a perimeter. Check and study the security protocols," Kelly concluded. Morrison nodded to his team, then turned back in. The simulation chamber was the size of a city block, with walls that could project any environment the architects had programmed into the system. As the human team stepped inside, the sterile metal floor vanished beneath their feet, replaced by burning sand that stretched to the horizon. The temperature instantly jumped to 140 degrees, and the air shimmered with heat waves. "Welcome to Phase 1, Observer Thijs Vel announced through the communication system. Her voice carried a note of concern that she tried to hide. "You are now on the surface of Kepler 442c, a desert world with extreme temperature variations, frequent sandstorms, and aggressive predatory species." Morrison looked around at the endless dunes and grinned. "Nice weather we're having." The simulation was designed to test every aspect of environmental survival. The blazing sun overhead would drain water from any living being within hours. The sand was mixed with microscopic crystals that could cut through most protective equipment. Hidden beneath the dunes were creatures that had evolved to hunt anything that moved on the surface. Most species establish a defensive perimeter immediately, Thijsvel continued. "The Veltar built crystalline fortresses. The Korthak dug bunkers with their mining equipment. What is your plan?" Rodriguez was already kneeling in the sand, studying the crystal formations. "These are amazing. Look at how they reflect heat, while maintaining structural integrity." She held up a handful of the glittering sand. "This could actually be useful for shelter construction." "Temperature's not that bad," Kelly observed, checking his instruments. "Feels like summer training in Arizona. At least there's no humidity." Russo was examining the rocky outcroppings scattered across the landscape. "Interesting geology. See those layered formations? That suggests water sources, probably underground. And look at the vegetation patterns." Carter was watching the team. Dynamics with professional interest. Everyone's stress levels are actually dropping. That's unusual for this type of environment. "Dropping?" Thijsvel asked in surprise. "The environmental readings show lethal conditions for most species." "It's all about perspective," Morrison explained, taking off his jacket and tying it around his waist. "This is actually pretty mild compared to some places we've been. Remember that volcano world where we had to rescue those miners?" "Oh yeah," Kelly laughed. "Now that was hot. This is just warm." The first test came quickly. The ground began to shake and massive creatures erupted from beneath the sand. They were the size of bears, but moved like giant serpents, with crystalline teeth and eyes that glowed red in the heat. The simulation called them sand reapers, and they had killed more test subjects than any other predator in the program. Most species either ran in panic or immediately attacked with whatever weapons they had brought. The humans did something different. Easy. "There, big guy," Kelly said calmly as one of the creatures approached him. He slowly backed away, keeping his hands visible and his movements non-threatening. "We're just passing through." Rodriguez was practically bouncing with excitement. "Look at their adaptation strategies. Those crystalline teeth aren't just for killing. They're for processing the sand crystals. And see how their skin reflects heat? They're perfectly designed for this environment." "They're pack hunters," Carter observed, watching the creature's behavior. "But they're not attacking. They're trying to determine if we're a threat." Morrison had noticed the same thing. They're curious about us. Probably don't see many visitors who aren't running or shooting. Russo was studying the creature's movement patterns. They're avoiding the rocky areas. Probably means the rocks are either too hot or too unstable for them. Instead of fighting or fleeing, the humans began treating the Sand Reapers like wildlife, on a nature preserve. Rodriguez started taking notes on their behavior while maintaining a respectful distance. Kelly used hand signals to communicate peaceful intentions. Morrison led the team in a wide circle that avoided the creature's territory while heading toward the rock formations Russo had identified. The Sand Reapers followed them for a while, but when it became clear the humans posed no threat and offered no challenge, they lost interest and disappeared back into the sand. Fascinating, Thisvel muttered to herself in the observation room. They treated apex predators like park animals. The next challenge hit without warning. The sky darkened as a massive sandstorm approached, with winds reaching 200 miles per hour. The wall of sand stretched from the ground to the clouds, and it would hit them in minutes. Standard protocol is to find shelter and wait it out, Thisvel announced. Most species lose team members to these storms. The humans looked at the approaching storm and sprang into action, but not the way other species did. Instead of panicking or seeking immediate shelter, they started working together with practiced efficiency. Russo, what do we need for a wind shelter? Morrison called out. Something aerodynamic and anchored deep, the engineer replied, already gathering rocks and the strange crystalline plants that grew near the rock formations. These plants have root systems that go down pretty far. If we can weave them together, I'll... Help! Rodriguez said, pulling out her field tools. These root structures are incredibly strong, and look, the crystals in the sand actually bond when they're compressed. Natural building material. Carter was watching the storm's approach and timing its speed. We got about 10 minutes, that's plenty of time. Kelly was scouting the area for the best location. There's a natural windbreak behind those rocks. If we build the shelter in the lee side, the wind will actually help hold it in place. What happened next amazed even Thisvel, who had seen hundreds of species attempt this challenge. Instead of building a bunker or hiding in caves, the humans constructed what they called a storm lean-to, using local materials and principles of aerodynamics that turned the deadly wind into a structural advantage. When the storm hit, other species would have been huddled in terror, counting their casualties and hoping their shelters held. The humans were inside their improvised shelter, playing cards and sharing stories while the wind howled outside. This reminds me of that camping trip in Montana, Morrison said, dealing another hand. Remember the storm that knocked down half the forest? At least this one's warm, Rodriguez replied, checking her notes on the local ecosystem. And the acoustics are interesting. Listen to how the wind interacts with the crystal formations. Good learning experience, Carter added. Different stress responses in extreme weather, but team cohesion remains strong. The storm lasted 6 hours. When it finally passed, the human team emerged from their shelter refreshed and ready to continue exploring. The shelter itself had not only survived, but had actually improved during the storm, with the wind-blown sand creating additional insulation and structural support. How are you feeling? Thisvel asked, expecting to hear reports of exhaustion, dehydration, and stress. Great, Morrison replied. The storm was actually kind of relaxing. Good white noise for sleeping. Plus, we got some excellent data on local weather patterns, Rodriguez added. And I found 3 new species of crystal-based plant life. The engineering possibilities here are amazing, Russo said. These building techniques could be useful in a dozen different environments. Kelly was already scouting their next route. Storm cleared the air nicely. Good visibility for the next phase of exploration. As the simulation continued, the challenges escalated. Earthquakes that split the ground open, flash floods that turned dry riverbeds into raging torrents, temperature swings that could freeze or boil unprepared beings, and predators that had evolved specifically to hunt intelligent prey. The humans treated each new challenge as an interesting puzzle to solve. They mapped safe routes through earthquake zones, built flood defenses that actually improved the local water distribution, developed clothing that adapted to temperature changes, and established what Rodriguez called respectful coexistence protocols with the various predators they encountered. By the end of 30 days, the human team had not only survived every challenge the simulation could throw at them, but they had actually improved the simulated environment. Their water management systems supported local wildlife, their building techniques created shelters that other species could use, and their approach to predator relations had established a peaceful ecosystem where none had existed before. Phase 1 complete, Thesvel announced, her voice betraying her amazement. 0 casualties, 100% mission success, and she paused, checking her readings again. You've actually gained weight and improved your physical condition. Good workout program, Kelly said with a grin. Nothing like a little environmental challenge to keep you in shape. When do we start? Phase 2? Morrison asked eagerly. Thesvel stared at them through the observation window. In 6 centuries of testing, she had never seen anything like this. The humans had turned the galaxy's most feared survival challenge into what they called an excellent team-building exercise. Phase 2 would be different, she told herself. Resource scarcity and psychological pressure would surely test these strange beings properly. She had no idea she was about to be surprised again. The space station simulation materialized around the human team like a nightmare made real. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, emergency lights flashed red in the corridors, and the air tasted of smoke and fear. Warning alarms blared constantly, announcing failing life support systems, depleting oxygen reserves, and critical structural damage. Welcome to Phase 2, observer Thesvel announced, though her voice carried less confidence than before. The human's performance in Phase 1 had shaken her assumptions about the test. You are aboard Deep Space Station Omega-7. Multiple system failures have left you with limited resources and failing life support. You must work with representatives from other species to survive. Morrison looked around at the chaos and nodded approvingly. Reminds me of that mining station disaster we helped with last year. At least this one still has artificial gravity. The simulation included holographic representatives of 5 different species, each programmed with the typical responses their races had shown during actual tests. There was a Veltar crystal being named Zith-Ka, a gaseous breath singer called Whisper of Stars, a heavily armored Korthak warrior known as Battle Chief Thak, a spider-like Arachnon engineer designated as Tech Weaver 9, and a plant-based chlorophyte called Root Deep Wisdom. All of them looked terrified. The station will completely lose life support in 72 hours, Thesvel continued. Food and water reserves are critically low. Communication with rescue ships has been severed. Your task is to survive until help arrives, if it arrives at all. The holographic aliens immediately began arguing among themselves, which was exactly what the simulation expected. The Korthak demanded that everyone follow his military leadership. The Veltar insisted that only crystal-based technology could save them. The breath singer wanted to sing the station into a different configuration. The Arachnon began building a web-based shelter for herself alone. The chlorophyte planted herself in the hydroponics bay and refused to move. This was the pattern the test had recorded for centuries. When resources became scarce and death approached, species reverted to their basic survival instincts. Cooperation broke down. Leadership disputes arose, and teams destroyed themselves from within even when external solutions existed. The humans watched this chaos for exactly 30 seconds before Rodriguez stepped forward with a bright smile. "Hi, everyone," she said cheerfully. I'm Lisa, and these are my teammates. Looks like we're all in this together, so why don't we start with introductions and then figure out what we're working with? The holographic aliens stopped arguing and stared at her. In hundreds of simulations, no species had ever responded to the crisis scenario with friendly social interaction. This is not time for pleasantries, Battle Chief Thack growled. We must establish command structure immediately. I am ranking military officer. That's great, Carter said with genuine enthusiasm. Military experience will be really helpful, but first, let's make sure everyone's comfortable and knows what's going on. Before anyone could object, the humans had somehow reorganized the entire group into a circle on the floor of the main corridor. Morrison had found emergency rations and was distributing them equally among all team members. Kelly was checking everyone for injuries. Russo was already examining the station schematics with Tech Weaver 9, asking her opinion on various repair strategies. Wait, whispered Whisper of Stars, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. Are we not supposed to be fighting for survival? Well, sure, Rodriguez replied, but fighting each other won't help us survive. Fighting the problems together will. Carter had started what she called a team check-in, where everyone shared their immediate concerns and capabilities. Battle Chief Thack, you mentioned military experience. What kind of emergency protocols do the Korthak use for station failures? The holographic warrior found himself explaining Korthak disaster management procedures, which actually contained several useful strategies the others hadn't considered. When he finished, Carter turned to the next team member. Zith-Ka, what can you tell us about crystal-based power systems? Some of the backup generators look like they might be compatible with Veltar technology. Within an hour, what should have been a desperate struggle for survival had turned into what Morrison called the galaxy's most interesting technical workshop. Each species was sharing their knowledge and expertise, building on each other's ideas instead of competing for limited resources. When the first major crisis hit, they were ready for it. The main water recycling system failed completely, leaving them with enough drinking water for maybe 18 hours. Previous test groups had typically responded by hoarding their personal water supplies and forming protective factions. The humans suggested something different. Okay, Russo said, studying the broken recycler with Tech Weaver 9. The primary filtration system is completely fried, but look at this. Whisper of Stars, your people can manipulate atmospheric moisture, right? Yes, the breath singer replied cautiously, but only small amounts. That's perfect, Rodriguez jumped in. And Root Deep Wisdom, your photosynthetic processes produce oxygen and process carbon dioxide, which could help with air recycling. But I require water to survive, the chlorophyte pointed out. Which brings us to Zith-Ka's crystal technology, Morrison added. Those power crystals generate heat as a byproduct. If we set up a distillation system using the heat from your crystals, moisture collection from Whisper of Stars' atmospheric manipulation, and filtration through Root Deep Wisdom's biological processes, we could actually produce more clean water than the original recycler. Battle Chief Thack stood up slowly. You want to use our different biological processes as a collaborative life support system? Why not? Kelly said with a shrug. We're all stuck here together. Might as well use everyone's natural abilities. What followed was the most unusual engineering project in the history of the Crucible test. The human team somehow convinced 5 different species to work together as a living machine, each contributing their unique capabilities to solve problems that had broken countless other civilizations. When the power grid failed, leaving them in darkness and cold, they didn't fight over the remaining energy cells. Instead, Zith-Ka provided crystal-based lighting, Whisper of Stars generated warmth through controlled atmospheric compression, and Root Deep Wisdom's bioluminescent flowers created a beautiful garden of light in the central corridor. When the food synthesizers broke down, leaving them with dwindling emergency rations, they didn't hoard or steal from each other. Rodriguez worked with Root Deep Wisdom to create hydroponic gardens using recycled nutrients. Battle Chief Thak shared Korthak military field cooking techniques that could make anything taste good. Tech Weaver 9 designed efficient rationing, systems that ensured everyone got proper nutrition. Each crisis that arose was met not with fear and competition, but with curiosity and collaboration. The humans somehow made problem-solving feel like a community project where everyone's contribution was valued and essential. "This is impossible," Theisvel muttered as she watched the readings. "Their stress levels are actually decreasing as the challenges increase." Dr. Carter overheard the comment through the communication system. "Well, stress is mostly about feeling helpless and isolated. When you're working together and everyone has something valuable to contribute, problems become opportunities to get creative." The final test of Phase 2 came when the station's structural integrity began failing. Massive hull breaches threatened to vent them all into space, and the artificial gravity was fluctuating wildly. This was the moment when most teams collapsed entirely, as the approaching death made all cooperation seem futile. The humans' response was to organize what they called an emergency party. "Look," Morrison explained to the group, "we might not make it through this, but we've spent the last few days working together and getting to know each other. If these are our last hours, let's make them good ones." They set up the party in the most stable section of the station, with everyone contributing something special from their culture. Battle Chief Thak taught them Korthak war songs that were surprisingly beautiful. Whisper of Stars performed atmospheric music that sounded like wind through crystal caves. Zith Ka created light sculptures that danced through the air. Root Deep Wisdom grew flowers that smelled like home to each different species. Tech Weaver 9 told stories about the great web cities of her homeworld. The humans contributed what they called campfire songs, and something Rodriguez referred to as really terrible jokes that somehow get funnier when you're exhausted. While they celebrated, they also worked. The party became a cover for the most complex repair operation any of them had ever attempted. Each species contributed their unique abilities to stabilize the station, but they did it while laughing and singing and sharing stories. When the rescue ships finally arrived, they found something unprecedented in the history of the Crucible: test. Instead of a desperate group of survivors barely clinging to life, they discovered a thriving temporary community that had actually improved the station's efficiency beyond its original specifications. "Phase 2 complete," Theisvel announced, her voice filled with something that sounded like awe. "0 casualties, 100% survival rate, and Signy." The final phase materialized as chaos incarnate. The human team found themselves aboard their rescue ship, but everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Alarms screamed from every direction as multiple disasters struck simultaneously. Their ship was falling apart while trying to evacuate a colony world that was literally exploding beneath them. "Phase 3 begins now," Observer Theisvel announced, her voice tight with anticipation. This was the test that broke even the strongest species. "You are conducting emergency evacuation of Colony Kepler 438b. The planet's core is destabilizing. You have 6 hours before total destruction." Morrison looked at the tactical display and whistled low. Volcanic eruptions were tearing the planet apart. Massive earthquakes had destroyed most of the infrastructure. Toxic gases filled the atmosphere. And somewhere down there, 50,000 colonists from 12 different species were waiting for rescue. At the same time, Theisvel continued, "Your ship has suffered critical damage. Life support is failing, navigation is offline, and you're losing hull integrity in 3 different sections." The simulation was designed to create impossible choices: save the ship or save the colonists, prioritize some species over others, choose between crew safety and mission success. Previous test subjects had either frozen under the pressure or made decisions that resulted in massive casualties. Rodriguez checked the sensor readings and grinned. Volcanic activity this intense creates some fascinating atmospheric conditions. Look at these mineral compositions in the ash clouds. Damage report looks manageable, Kelly said, reviewing the ship's status. Hull breaches in Section 7, 12, and 15. We can work with that. Russo was already studying the evacuation logistics. 50,000 people, 6 hours, 12 different species with various atmospheric requirements. Challenging but not impossible. Carter was monitoring the stress levels of the holographic crew members around them. Crew morale is dropping fast. We need to get everyone focused on solutions instead of problems. Morrison nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We've got a planet full of people who need our help, and our ship decided to pick today to have some technical difficulties. Standard Tuesday, really? His casual tone immediately caught the attention of every crew member in the simulation. They had expected emergency protocols and crisis management. Instead, their captain was treating a potential catastrophe like a routine problem. Engineering teams, I need you to patch those hull breaches using whatever you can find. Medical teams, start prepping for refugees with 12 different biology types. Navigation, get creative with those sensors and find us safe flight paths through all that volcanic ash. The crew began moving with purpose instead of panic. Morrison's confidence was infectious, and his practical approach made the impossible seem merely difficult. The first evacuation run was supposed to demonstrate the futility of the mission. The planet's surface was a hellscape of lava, toxic gases, and collapsing cities. Most test subjects attempted 1 or 2 rescue missions before accepting that they couldn't save everyone. The humans did something different. They turned the rescue operation into what Kelly called the galaxy's most interesting logistics exercise. Russo, can we use the volcanic thermal vents to boost our shuttle engines? Morrison asked as they approached the planet. Already working on it, the engineer replied. The mineral content in these ash clouds can actually improve engine efficiency if we filter it right, plus the atmospheric pressure differences could give us some interesting flight dynamics. Rodriguez was studying the readings from the surface. The colonists have gathered in the geologically stable zones, which is smart. But look at this. Some of the species are actually helping each other. The chlorophytes are providing oxygen for the breath singers, and the Korthak are using their strength to move equipment for the smaller species. Natural disaster response brings out the best in people, Carter observed. We should work with that instead of fighting it. What followed was the most complex rescue operation in the history of the Crucible test. While their ship literally fell apart around them, the human team coordinated 57 separate shuttle runs, evacuating colonists in groups organized by biological compatibility and rescue priority. But they didn't just rescue people. They rescued communities. When they found a Veltar crystal garden that the colonists didn't want to abandon, Rodriguez figured out how to transport the living crystals safely. When a group of Arachnon refused to leave their web city, Kelly worked out a way to move the entire structure intact. When the chlorophyte grove was threatened by lava, Russo designed a portable greenhouse that kept them alive during transport. You're supposed to make hard choices, Theisvel said, watching in amazement as the humans somehow managed to save not just lives, but also the cultural treasures that made those lives worth living. Hard choices are usually false choices, Morrison replied as he coordinated the next shuttle run. There's almost always a third option if you're creative enough to find it. The ultimate test came when their ship's engines finally failed completely. They were still in the planet's gravity well with half the colonists aboard and no way to reach orbit. This was the moment designed to break any species, forced to choose between certain death for all or sacrificing some to save others. Most test subjects chose to sacrifice themselves heroically. A few chose to save themselves and abandon the remaining colonists. Both responses were considered acceptable by the test parameters. The humans chose neither option. Okay, team, Morrison announced over the communication system. Our engines are dead, but we're not. Russo, what do we have to work with? Well, the engineer said thoughtfully, We've got those volcanic thermal vents, an atmosphere full of charged particles, and about 12 different species with various technological capabilities among our passengers. I like where this is going, Rodriguez said. The Veltar crystal technology could amplify electrical energy. The breath singers can manipulate atmospheric pressure. The Korthak have those portable fusion cells. And the Arachnon silk can conduct energy while remaining flexible under stress, Carter added. Plus, everyone wants to help because we've been helping them. What happened next became legendary throughout the galaxy. Using salvaged parts, passenger assistance, and the planet's own volcanic energy, the humans built an improvised propulsion system that not only got them to orbit but actually worked better than their original engines. They didn't just escape the exploding planet. They escaped it while conducting a real-time engineering seminar that taught 12 different species new techniques for emergency spaceflight. When the evacuation was complete and they had safely delivered all 50,000 colonists to the Council Rescue Fleet, Thisvel made her final announcement. Phase 3 complete. 0 casualties among crew or passengers. Mission parameters exceeded in all categories. She paused, checking her readings one more time to be sure. Furthermore, you have achieved the highest scores in the history of the Crucible test by significant margins. Morrison looked around at his tired but happy team. So did we pass? Captain Morrison, Thisvel said, her ancient voice filled with something like wonder. Your species has not only passed the test, you have redefined what we thought was possible. The celebration that followed spread throughout the council station as word of humanity's performance reached every species present, but the humans seemed most excited about something else entirely. When do we get to meet more alien species? Rodriguez asked eagerly. I have so many questions about biodiversity in different galactic regions. And I'd love to study comparative emergency response protocols, Carter added. The engineering possibilities are endless, Russo said. Imagine what we could build with access to all these different technologies. Plus, more training scenarios would be fun, Kelly concluded. Maybe next time with actual monsters instead of simulations. Observer Thisvel watched them with 6 centuries of experience and realized that the galaxy was about to change forever. These humans didn't just pass tests. They turned challenges into opportunities, strangers into friends, and impossible situations into adventures. Welcome to the Galactic Council, she said formally. Thanks, Morrison replied with his characteristic grin. This is going to be fun. 3 months later, the Council unanimously voted to ask humanity to help redesign the Crucible test. After all, if beings from a death world could laugh their way through the galaxy's greatest challenges while making everyone around them better in the process, perhaps it was time for the rest of the galaxy to learn something about the power of optimism, cooperation, and treating every problem as just another interesting puzzle to solve together. The age of humanity in the stars had begun, and it was going to be exactly what Captain Jake Morrison had promised. Fun.